This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV on YouTube and the Hannibal TV UFO channel on YouTube, where we have a custom UFO channel now, along with UFO Tarheel, my co host, and a very special guest tonight. He's an author at engineeringinfinitybook.com. If you want to check out his book that we're going to get into today, former staff sergeant in the Air Force. He's going to talk to us all about UFOs and the engineering behind some of these craft. Gene Sticco, how are you doing today, sir?
Good. Thank you. I appreciate you having me, Hannibal.
And this is the second interview. You and your wife did one with UFO Tarheel, and we'll put the link to that in the description.
Or him and
That
Jim.
one,
Jim, yeah.
a lot more technical than this one is going to be. That one is above my education level, but it's very interesting. And again, I'll pin it to the top of the comments when this is over too, and I suggest people check that out. But let's find out a little bit about your background here.
Yeah, so thanks again. I started out as a U.S. Air Force security specialist. So my main job all those years was nuclear weapon system security, and did some personal protection, a little bit of law enforcement mission, and deployed to all sorts of places in the early to mid 90s. After that, I went into the government contracting world. Particularly in intelligence and within the oil and gas industry is sort of where I landed. And I managed, as my long business card title would say, geopolitical and transnational security risks involving oil and energy infrastructure, which is a big fancy way of saying I sort of manage the relationships and issues between couple of global corporations and the countries that they operated in and the countries that those corporations were headquartered in, and had to make sure everybody was happy with what was happening as far as things were protected and whatnot. And so it delves into a lot of areas. That's a whole other show in itself. And retired in 2017 and 2019. These papers from my father-in-law landed in our laps, and those papers turned out to be the reverse engineering of a UFO under a Soviet program. And it has been a going on 5-year journey now, 4 years of translating, researching, and finally publishing them. And just really since June, kind of making the push to get it out there in public, because there was so much I would see in this community that I'm like, I get the answers in these papers, and but it's been a much harder journey than I imagined it would be, because like you said, Hannibal, a lot of it is technical, and people just really like the shiny stuff. They can talk about the shiny stuff, the blurry videos. That's where they want to be.
So now these papers that tell you all about how these craft are built, how did you come upon them?
He mailed them to us. In a conversation with my wife, we were catching him up on our son and our son's, passion for all things aerospace. And he was getting involved in Civil Air Patrol and learning to fly and all that. And he just said, I'm going to send you some things that I used to work on. He might be interested in someday. And shortly after receiving them, we got word he got really sick. It was almost a daily thing. Organs were failing. He was fading fast. And, right before New Year's Eve 2020, 2019 into 2020, Nat got a call in the morning. He had died about 17 hours earlier, was already buried in Kazakhstan. And it was a couple of weeks later when we finally took a look at what he had sent. And so then we were left with, we couldn't ask him about it, or couldn't get any details. So then we were kind of left with a mystery.
A hell of a mystery, right?
Oh, I mean, it's just, it's just mind blowing. And this wasn't, this was never my thing by any means. This wasn't, I always just say, I'd binge Ancient Aliens, maybe, was always open to it and all this and that. But diving into this work and living with it now for 5 years,
Mhm.
it literally has like changed my outlook in life and everything in a lot of ways, because it's clarified so much, not just about UAP UFO phenomenon, but just the feelings, the things we talk about, gut instinct, or we talk about the people you meet in life, and could you have made every sort of aspect. I find these connections to,
Yeah.
that time, it tells me time is not linear, it's cyclic, and it's, I blow my own mind with it. And then I sit back and I think about my father-in-law, and what my wife, and we've learned so much about him since he's died, and since we've dove into this. And when I first met my wife, and she's like, well, yeah, he's a troubled guy, he's a little crazy, he's an alcoholic, he's you know kind of a weird guy and whatnot. And now I sit there and I'm like, I'd be the same way if I had this knowledge in my brain and nobody to share it with, nobody to believe it, particularly if you're the guy that did the work.
But isn't that funny that we want to focus on that about people who are potentially tied to um, something very amazing, something that requires extraordinary evidence to support their claim, and we immediately have to go and check their life.
Yeah.
Just like you bringing up the fact that he had a struggle with alcoholism. I always bring up with your story, kind of synonymous with that, with the Lazar story. And remember, back with Lazar, we jumped right to his stuff. Oh, he had something going on with strippers, and oh, he likes guns and he likes women, and we bring up all the vices, and it's
Yeah.
like they can't be human. The people who deal with this can't possibly be human. They have to be some, Christ-like creature that has never done any wrong. And it's like, well, what if they're just as flawed as we are? And what if maybe they're working on, because they can't talk to anybody?
Right.
Maybe it messes with them and they're left to their vices. So I don't know. What do you think about
Absolutely.
that?
And I'll tell you, my years being an investigator, and doing, investigative intel type work and things like that, there were always two different types of people that raised my alerts. Number one were the ones who were so moral about everything, and any transgression anyone else did, was just this horrible affront to God and nature and
Yeah,
all
I'm
of that.
weary of those people.
You know what? And I used to call them straight out, and I'd say I'd rather know this guy was banging his secretary than, I know you're probably going home and your wife's putting out cigarette butts in your balls as you scream about how bad this guy is. I said, because that's probably what's happening. And the number two thing was, as soon as somebody invoked God, I knew I had him. As soon as,
Yeah.
it was, I swear to God, I do or it would interest you to know I'm a minister. No, it doesn't really interest me to know
Yeah,
you're a minister. But now I know you're just trying to hide behind
I
that
would rather
shield.
know about how you're one of us,
Yeah.
and you battle with some shit, whatever that shit may be, and I'm not going to judge you for it. But one thing I do want to ask you about, since you got into it, what do you make about the FBI sniffing around all this Soviet stuff now? They're calling up Robert Hastings, they're bumping into you, they're bumping into all these people, and they're asking, and the FBI sniffing around all the old Soviet stuff. Nothing new. They want to know about the old legacy stuff.
Yeah.
And that just, do you have a kind of a take on that, or what do you think about that?
Again, it's you try to not become paranoid about anything. But you look at chains of events and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I started the circulating this material in 2020. So there's been a window where, I'm reaching out to academics. I'm reaching out to all the popular figures in ufology, all the champions and advocates, and I'm sending it around and sending screenshots. And then I start becoming more public about it. And then, we start seeing these things from, like Hastings and whatnot. I don't, I I would have to make the assumption that, the body of work that my father-in-law did, I think all indications are US has known the exact same things. They seem to have different long-term approaches to it between Russia and the US, which I think is somewhat part of the Russian strategy and all that. But where the poking around comes from, I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it. And that's why I think the book has been avoided so much by key people and key figures. Number one, I shared with you,
Oh, that's
there's somebody
interesting. Yeah.
who's very, who is a leader in the field, and I saw the text where he's like, "Oh, this is all over my head." But again, it's mirrored, it's echoed in so much of the science, so much of the government programs and everything.
Hmm.
I don't believe that this is new to them, but I think if anything, when it comes to me now, nobody knows what do I want? What am I trying to do with this? Where am I trying to honestly, the answer to that is I'm just trying to share it because again, to me, it has all the answers. I have yet to find it wrong.
Yeah.
What are all the answers? Sum it up for us.
So I think the easiest way to do it is this idea that, as I mentioned, time is not linear. That we have probably, or there's the high confidence, as we'll say in intelligence terms, that our origins are more tied to, and I'll say non-human, NHI, um, are more tied to that than not. I think a lot of the phenomenon, a lot of the questions we have, and all of that, I think if there is full disclosure and a full accounting for of history and a settling of lore and all the rest of it, I think people are going to be highly disappointed. I think it's not going to be as sexy as everybody hopes it, or thinks it is. Um, I think it represents, again, whether you look at it from the ufology experience, from a metaphysical experience, or from a religious experience, I think it definitely reinforces the idea of humans as a species and our interconnectedness, um, and our the way we are meant to harmonize with the universe and with nature and things like that. And I don't want to sound all hippie-ish or anything, but you take any one of those principles, and I can be like, you're right, but kind of for the wrong reasons. Any of these things that they're talking about, and we're very much on this journey of reaching the level of consciousness and resonance with the universe that will allow us to have more open exchanges cross cross species, let's say, if we're talking, if we maintain in terms of NHI.
Hmm.
And I've toyed with so much. I mean, there's a part of me that even thinks NHI is an incorrect term. And I am thinking more in terms that what we consider to be aliens are just other versions of humans, and that we probably have more in common with them than we don't. And this is a cyclical type thing that we're going through, as a species. And part of that thinking as well is if you ask the government the question, well, tell me about NHI. Well, we have nothing on NHI, but you didn't ask them about other species of humans, which
Yeah.
is different.
And it makes
And
you
so then they're
wonder.
not lying
Yeah,
and
it
they're not
definitely.
covering anything up. You just never asked.
Yeah, it definitely makes you wonder how much is, you know, how much is sitting out there just because of, like you were talking about people being attached to the shiny object. We don't dig, but
Mhm.
maybe we're not digging because of stigma still there. We had the presidential candidates laughed on the stage. I believe it was the RNC debate from a few years ago. It was not the RNC, it was the primary debates for the RNC a few years ago. Because I remember Chris Christie and some others were up there because he was the first one to say, "You're giving me the alien question," and everyone laughed at him. And or was, all even the candidates up there were even laughing. So I think there's still the stigma, but
Mhm.
then I think you're fighting the stigma then with something like what you're talking about. How do you get past stigma? You go reach out to the people who take this serious, just like you have, and then the people that are taking it serious, they hear Soviet, and it's like either maybe they've already had that knock on the door a few years ago from intelligence communities and they didn't like it. It's unnerving.
Yeah.
And they're just like, I don't want to get near it again. It's just like, fare thee well. I hope you well with it, but it's not going to work out for me anymore. The kind of thing. I don't know. But I think when you clash those two together, that's where you're running into what your situation is. It's like people just crack the book and they go, oh man, I don't know,
Over my head. Yeah.
this is a lot. But then when you actually start reading it, and now you have AI tools, like you can put a GPT on it and it can help you like ask some questions and not have to be this uber
Right.
expert in all things, uh, advanced propulsion, to actually ask some questions of it. But yeah, I definitely think like when you said something there, you triggered me like with the you almost make it sound like an enlightenment period is something like even Chernayev talks about, right? It talks about with these societies how they go through this peak and then this drop off. And
Yeah.
now I'm hearing this stuff like all these people are like seem to be going into some type of doomsday prep. Did you hear this week about Peter Thiel is getting ready to do the Antichrist series? He's going to do a 4-part series about the Antichrist. I mean, like,
No, I didn't hear that. I was just saw on another show I was sitting in on. It was again a I guess well respected doctor of some kind, just talking about apocalyptic end of the world, end of all life form things.
yeah,
And and this is what I find so interesting. Again, being an outsider, new to the community, and trying to find a place and trying to have some discussions and share ideas. um People are so fixated on that they know,
oh yeah,
and I'm like, how do you know? You don't know. There's nothing to know.
yeah,
You have beliefs. There's other books and things that people have written with their ideas, but you actually really don't know anything. And again, some of they're like 99% there, right? And then I'm like, here is the materials, right? Here is, by all intents, here is the reverse engineering that covers all of these phases. If you take what your theory was and now plug this in, you're 100% there,
How do you know it's real, though? What makes yours so credible, your information?
So there's a few things. If we just look at it from a scientific perspective, animal, the number one thing is I can't prove it wrong. That in all of whether I look at the programs that the US government has done, those are aligned, those are adjacent with the same science that's in the book, or that's in the papers, let's say. Um, Defense programs, there are defense programs that would specifically counter the technology that makes the craft itself. There is science that has come out since my father-in-law died in 2019, and these were written in 1980s to 2000 at the latest, let's say. And in the 25 years since then, there is science that at the time somebody would say it's pseudoscience, it's theory, but it is actually being done now. China, Russia, I think Singapore or Japan, just had these same kind of plasma engines. From Russia, there is language and there's technology that comes out that, again, is adjacent. It mirrors, it echoes this body of work. There are patents, Chinese, Russian, US patents. The science is, consistent all the way through it. So it's a combination of those things. It is that in and of itself, it is a consistent body of work that provides you with testable information, testable details. And that's why we published it the way we did, because I'm not a physicist. I don't know, but you can, you can test a lot of it. There's some things we don't have the materials for to test. But again, then we see it reflected in the government programs and everything down the line. So it is too consistent to be coincidental across a spectrum of 50 plus core scientific topics that were written 40 years ago.
Yeah, and I think that's why, it's hard to get people to wrap their heads around a lot of the technical details, not just in what you put out, but even some of the newer stuff. And that's why I think you start seeing the community trickle over into this entertainment mode.
Sure.
Because, that's what sells, right? What is going to sell to people on the big stage, and is it another documentary with Marco Rubio sitting around talking about aliens and UFOs? Is it a Skywatcher group that's going to put out, blurry photo of a party balloon floating by, and we're going to nickname that the Squid? And even though we don't have any goddamn clue what that thing was, it was 4,000 feet away in the air. We don't know what it was, but it looked like a squid, right? So, I mean, this is a stuff. It seems this is where a lot of us are frustrated. That's been around longer than just 2017.
Yep.
For those people that entered the UFO realm in 2017, okay, the Tic Tac got you into this. That's awesome. I'm not knocking you.
Yep.
But for those of us that were predating the Tic Tac by 10 to 15 years, we've seen the entertainment ramp up. And now it's like, how do we take entertainment out of the technical aspect of this? Someone's mentioning Hollywood. Hollywood is another thing that, we hear that, who's the big director? He's coming out with another movie.
Spielberg.
Yeah, Spielberg's coming out with another one. Is
that going to be based on reality? Is that going to be a form of disclosure? Does anyone know? Sorry to interrupt.
Somebody said that Grush was helping out on that.
Oh, really?
Grush was brought in as like one of the people that was helping do some of the storytelling. I'll try to find the post, but there was a post, someone had said that Grush was out there helping out as like an advisor on that. The same way as when the other one was done, the Contact of the Third Kind, or whatever that was called.
Yeah,
you remember the hit?
Yep.
Yeah. And they said that Jacques Vallée was brought in on that one. He seems to always like to bring in someone who's been close to it so he can get it as close as possible to, the real deal. And again, it's just because he has an interest too. Everyone tries to talk like, oh, well, they're speaking through him, the government is, and they're using the media. I don't know. What do you think about that? Like how much influence they have over the media?
Well, it's a classic. There's so much that I see again that is classic counterintelligence type operations in the way all this rolls out. Okay, to be totally frank and honest. And you're right. The majority of what we have is disclosure themed entertainment that is going forward. I'm very much of the position, and again, it's just reinforced by what I know from my father-in-law's papers, that, all right, they've got it. They are going to tell the story in their way, in their timeline, for the most politically expedient reasons. So you're never going to be able to count on it. But if you look at all these characters, and on the website, I've actually broke it down under the research tab. There's a graph that I think is labeled disclosure declassified or something like that.
Mhm.
But it looks at all of these different influence groups that are making up the narrative and their degree of closeness and sort of dependence upon their relationships within the government circle to be able to have the access that keeps them popular, that keeps that gets all the headlines,
Sure.
right? And
Yeah.
the drops on it. And then you've sort of got a second tier that exists that, maybe falls more into the grifters and the people who, again, feed that ecosystem and amplify it.
Yeah.
You have detractors, particularly from the government side, who are there or being influenced in order to control the pressure valves and make sure things don't get out of hand. And I think the situation we see right now that we're in, and all the fighting in Congress and the questions and is there interest and this whole hot mess, I think that is more indicative of the government originally having this controlled disclosure type process that they were going to drip it out over time, and that pipeline, that system has reached its capacity and it's no longer manageable. So now we're seeing what is described as transition by design, where there's a lot more focus, and it starts with the UAP Disclosure Act, this new one and its new structure. So
Mhm.
the new focus is on better structuring the institutions.
Mhm.
And what we'll see, and we're already seeing some of it come out, because the next step becomes the international cooperation. So we're already hearing of things in Canada, in the UK, of it becoming more mainstream. So if you watch the dominoes of NATO allies begin to do and mirror similar things, then we're sort of entering at that point it's like the third or fourth phase, where it really the language becomes consistent. It doesn't come across as shocking anymore. It becomes normalized in a sense. And then once that language is more normalized within the government circles, that begins going more into mainstream media, who are
Mhm.
then going to take so much of this science
Yeah.
around these things and amplify those more. So that's sort of the
But if they
year one
water
go.
it down more, you bring up the Disclosure Act, they're going to present it again in its entirety, is what it sounds like Schumer's saying. If they water it down again, they watered it down last year. Well, they castrated it essentially. They didn't leave much
Right.
there. And now if they present it again, and it's got eminent domain and this review panel that's got to review the content and disseminate and release it, and if they water it down again this year, how many more of these does the broader world, because the world is watching this on stage, right? They watch America's government deal with this because no other governments are openly dealing with this in parliament or anything like that.
Yep.
So they're watching our congresspersons do this, and if they remove it or water it down again twice back to back and take all the goods out of there for UAP disclosure, what does that say? Like, what kind of signal does that send from government? People can call this stuff fake all they want, but you wouldn't constantly keep doing something like that unless there's a there there. I mean, what are they so afraid of?
Well, again, it's what's politically beneficial and expedient. And I think we often mistake. I think this is a case where we mistake the act, or we are imposing intent upon the act, right?
Yeah.
They don't care about the truth and all of these things that we care so much about, the community cares so much about. They don't care about it in the same way. They have a mission. They have to figure out how to make this palatable, right? Because we're, again, singing to the choir. We're already convinced, we just want the dirty details. We already know you've been cheating on us. I found the receipts. Now I want to know where you got where you gave them that blowjob. Yeah, that's it.
It's so funny. I always draw the comparison of like, a spouse being caught, in some
Right. And
nefarious relationship. Because
right.
yeah,
what's the husband doing? Oh, baby, you're crazy. No, that's not the receipt. You don't understand. I'm trying to do something really nice for you, but you're ruining it by asking me.
yeah, yeah. It does seem
geez,
like it's a
all my
small
friends tell
trickle,
me.
a very small trickle of the truth, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the likelihood of disclosure by the government or them providing some sort of physical evidence?
Yeah.
So again, I think it comes when it is most politically expedient. And what form it takes, again, will be determined on what's most palatable. So again, the idea of a craft landing on the White House lawn, that is catastrophic to everything and throws it all off. I think it will be this slow progression initially led by science. We might begin to see, once countries are all on board, sort of multiple coordinated sightings. Oh, we have this craft. Geez, it was seen in Canada and the US and Mexico, and and it begins to look so they're telling a story. And the legislation is part of that story as well. It is not for the benefit of disclosure. It is for the benefit of managing the information flow and all of that. And if you take yourself outside of this community, the average American who doesn't care about this really, then everything seems realistic and reasonable. So, geez, the government, there's Tulsi Gabbard, JP, VP Vance. There's plenty of government officials now dripping, oh, I think, I've seen, I'm sure, blah, blah,
there's
blah.
tons of them.
Tons of them, right? And that's great. And that's all being road tested. That's all being
I've never heard more government officials talk about it than what we hear now. All the way up the chain and every branch. Everybody's got a story now, know. So I don't know. There again, I just don't know if it's like, are they just grasping on to, our curiosity, and they're like, hey, my constituents are curious. I'm gonna like, this is me connecting with you. I'm curious too. It's very hard to understand, like, are they just trying to connect with us because they like our votes, right?
Of course, right? We're a demographic. But I think, again, it's the inevitability of a disclosure event. So whether it's, again, following the logic through my father-in-law's work, which also kind of points to 2027 being a time frame in which there will be something undeniable. And so now they've got to walk that path there. They have to engineer their path to getting this information out in a way that's not going to significantly disrupt institutions and social order and send people jumping off of bridges or anything like that and causing mass panic. Which again poses a whole other ton of questions on how much then do they actually know, right? Because then there would be, there's the good scenario, there's the bad scenario, and there's the they legitimately don't know scenario. And perhaps it is that they legitimately don't know. So again, I think that's the tension on the inside. Is it's all about making gestures and doing things that the general populace would see as realistic and reasonable and responsible. Whether we like it or not is irrelevant, right? Whether the community likes it or not doesn't matter. They've done something. They can say they've done something. And and again, I think 2027 is significant, not because something's going to drop out of the sky. I think it's significant because it's that 75-year window from the 1952 DC UFO incidents. That work has been related to Dr. Villarreal's study of the transient satellites.
Yeah.
I think there's more information that is classified that wasn't revealed as part of Project Blue Book, which in 2027 automatically becomes releasable. So if we think about a politically expedient and beneficial course of action, here 25, 26, Congress passes legislation. Into 27, we start having other drips of government officials saying, oh, I believe I've seen things, blah, blah, blah. 2027, the documents that were going to be declassified anyway get declassified. But what happens? Now Trump gets to stand up and say, I'm the declassification president, and whoever is in the position that's going to be the heir apparent for the 2028 election then takes that ball and runs with it at that point.
Yeah. And we've also had Jeremy Corbell claim that this fake UFO story from the government is going to come, that someone's bringing up, that Avi Loeb has been talking about something different to that, that supposedly we're going to know more about it in October. This what is it, 9-mile wide or 7-mile wide interstellar object that's coming towards us. Do you think that is a legitimate comet, or do you think it could be something else, or is it a Project Blue Beam type of thing?
I mean, really, I haven't even looked at it all that much. I mean, I do not dive into chasing everything that comes out. I listen to I try to follow the signals. And I think, Casey, you talked about it a little bit, Avi Loeb has motivations for it being something, evil, right? Because I've got to get, I need funding. I need, more staff. I need, X, Y, Z. Jeremy Corbell, the same way. I think, again, I go back to my father-in-law's work. Based on that, this 2027 window makes sense. If the U.S. government had access to, let's say, the ability to form the same types of conclusions, so they're kind of working off of similar playbooks, I think the Corbell situation might be that somebody who did not have firsthand knowledge, who was just kind of on the periphery, is just trying to make sense of things they're hearing, would then combine it with, the asteroid. So I think there's a lot of things getting convoluted where, you have somebody who kind of is in the government and they might be looking at Corbell saying, hey, I'm retiring in 2 or 3 years. I better start getting in on this as I can and building some credibility.
There's definitely some gravy train to it. Yeah. I mean,
right. There's a big gravy train to it. So, again, I think it is is there a there? Sure. There's a there. I think something's going to happen. I don't think it's going to be nearly as exciting or sexy as, we hope it is, like a 9-mile wide, spaceship that comes down and lands on the White House lawn. But it is certainly something's there.
That's going to be more than exciting. That's going to be downright scary and catastrophic if that happens.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, depends on, really it depends on what happens, right? If they come out and they're like, yeah, here we are, we just checking in on y'all. See you later.
Yeah.
Then we're going to kind of be like, oh.
Because it's not, and see, with the ramp up of AI, it can't be a photo or video anymore. I mean, we have screwed ourselves for photos and videos because we can never get one that wasn't notoriously taken by Radio Shack equipment from the 70s.
Right.
And, now AI is so good at creating this stuff, no one trusts anything. It doesn't matter. How many, when you're swiping through on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, how many videos come out now where you see them and you just swipe on. You don't even watch it anymore because you're just like, it's
And
probably
again,
AI, you know.
and again, we're becoming desensitized to it.
See, and that's what I'm
That's
saying.
part of the strategy. You know, that's part of a strategy too. Is
It
just
is.
Okay. There it is. There's the thing. Oh wow, cool. All right.
Because it's always made me wonder if people in government like that are, if there is some type of cover up, which we know some type of cover up is going on. Let's just go ahead and get past that because
Yeah.
they wouldn't even be interested in making contacts. You made a point earlier where you said the entertainers, you know, like the Ross Coultharts and these people, they have their government contacts. I actually believe they do have government contacts. And then you have to wonder, like, well, why would the government even care if there's no there? So there's definitely something going on. But my point is, it makes me wonder if they look at stuff and go, I wonder if people just realize they just saw a real alien video. Like they really just saw an extraterrestrial, but we have flooded the zone so much with BS that they'll never even know it now. Now, if a good video or photo comes out, they'll never even know because.
And that's why I go back to, you've got to go to the science, right?
Yeah.
How did I woke up at 2:00 at one morning and thought to myself, what if they're hiding it all in plain sight?
Mm-hmm.
What if it's all publicly available? And it is. It is. But the thing is, they don't list it as, UFO, solenoid system, blah, blah, blah. They just list solenoid system research, magnetohydrodynamic research on this. Da, 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 da. When I chase the science, it's all right there.
Yeah.
It's declassified, it's public, it's all and there's the number one intel thing, right? Hide it in plain sight.
But they know we can't consume it all. It's the same thing with a lot of these papers that they put out and a lot of papers that got declassified. If you now go out and search what's been released as far as declassified paperwork about the FBI talking to the CIA or inside the CIA talking to each other, or all these different intelligence communities talking to each other about anomalous sightings, there's too many to even go through. I mean, and I think they know if they just flood the zone, if they're like, look, let's just start smacking them with it all. Now, to your point, no, we're not going to release a disc. We're not going to release a video. Even these videos, what did you think about this from being in the Air Force, Gene, and from being involved in these programs where, you're working on behalf of interests overseas and things like that? What did you think of this idea of people just walking out of the Pentagon with videos in the first place? When you saw these videos come out of the Tic Tac and the Go Fast, and they said, oh, well, Chris Mellon or somebody just walked out of the DOD with the video. What do you think about that when you see something like that?
Again, that's how you know it's all a setup, right? Okay. That's how you know it's all the whistleblower process, right? That is one process in the United States government. I have experienced or seen something I think is illegal or immoral happening in my agency. I go to the office of the Inspector General for my agency and I file a whistleblower report with them. Then the Inspector General takes that report and conducts an investigation, blah, blah, blah. They have to send it to Congress. And then the Congress, follows up.
Whole big process. Yeah.
There is a whole process there. There are the exceptions. Watergate was one, where people really feel like their lives are in danger. So they do that and they go to the press. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, where do they go? They walk down to the Washington Post usually and do it. Where in the fucking process I'm a whistleblower and your first stop is to go see Jeremy Corbell defies any sort of logic, or that he can protect you in some way.
He knows the martial arts yoga thing that he does.
Yeah, he did. He did quantum. Did you hear he started quantum martial arts?
He's always talking about how tough he is.
Yeah, when he was he's an avatar, right? In reality. In his 20s, he called it quantum jujitsu, which was actually a program that he got from some woman up in Seattle who had sort of coined her new thing, quantum martial arts. But if you look at him, he's really an avatar, right? He looks like every veteran-owned coffee shop owner that is out there. He's got the high and tight. He's got the trim beard. He's, in good shape. He's got those romantic, piercing blue eyes.
He's trying to do the mustache that you've perfected too.
He wants the mustache. But again, he is a familiar avatar to the public of a, like the brawny towel guy, right? It's somebody you look to and you don't know why you trust them, but you trust them. Where both people look at me, sometimes they think I look like Wags from Billions. And, that becomes a whole thing. But, and then he's learned the language. That's why I always say that video of him, pumping up Lou Elizondo and Lou's looking at him, and then he goes in to give him the bro hug, and you see Lou like cringe. It's because Lou's actually a military person, right? And yeah, there is that bond that I can meet you and we can talk for 20 minutes and then we're going to be, hugging, before we leave. And Corbell was trying to replicate that as the avatar. And then he, stomps down the hallways of Congress with his duffel bag, backpack thing. And he's playing a role.
Yeah. And I mean, that's just the insane part to me is every time I hear this story, I get stuck on that. When someone tries to come at me and they say, well, Chris Mellon this and Chris Mellon that and everything else. And I'm like, these people claim that they just stroll out of the, Pentagon with things like they wouldn't get in trouble for that. Like, you really think that's true?
Right.
You really think they just let people stroll around and say, oh, by the way, yeah, I saved this to a thumb drive and walked out of, and then to your point, I went to the New York Times with it and let Leslie Kean run her thing on it. And then I went to CNN and let them put Lou up on the screen for, how long was Lou on the screen with these videos? Like a month straight, showing the Go Fast, showing all the stuff. Oh, well, how did you get these? Oh, well, somebody, did this out of it. And then years after, we then hear them validate the videos or something. It's like the Air Force or somebody came out and they validated them and said, yeah, that is our videos. Yeah, they're ours. But it was like 2 or 3 years after that 2017 release.
Yeah.
And then to your point, it has to be orchestrated. It has to be,
because if it were that easy, Casey, right? We'd have
No.
we'd have had the MLK and the JFK files in 1970. Would have had the Watergate files all walking out the doors. If it were that easy to do it, then everybody would be doing
They
it.
had to have colluded
Of course.
and work together on that. And then again, now you're back to square one. Why are they working together? Why would they let Chris Mellon or whoever walked out of the Pentagon? I don't think it was Lou. I think it was probably Chris. Why would they just walk out of, out of there with that? And then I've heard it said other ways too. Now I will acknowledge that. I've heard people say Chris Mellon, lobbied to get those released. Almost like I've heard it both ways. I don't know which is true. I don't know.
Somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle where I've heard he walked out and then I heard he asked for him and lobbied for it. But again, he was in no official capacity back in 2017. If I'm not mistaken, he had already moved on. So it's like, either way, if the government gave him the videos after he lobbied for him or if he walked out with them, either way, they worked with him and they were part of this release. And now you have to ask yourself, why are they propagating a narrative, even if it's not true? Let's just say it is Lockheed, because did you see the news that came out this week about the earnings release from Lockheed?
Yes.
What do you think about that? Because I mean, they're pretty much saying like, look, we got a big cost expenditure that we can't tell you about, shareholders. All right. So Hannibal, I don't know if you heard about this either, but it's earnings release week, right? Everybody's releasing their earnings, Fortune 500, all these big companies. And Lockheed comes out, their CEO, James Taglett, I think is how you pronounce it, and he comes out and he says, and credit Ross Coulthart because he was one of the ones reporting on this, but said that somewhere around $1 billion, and it's part of the Skunk Work program, and they can't talk about the expenditure in detail because it's part of classified programs, but he coined several phrases in this statement. He said it was disconnecting us when we started to see the cost growth, talking about working with the government on like working on this program after we've done the review previously, but that's the nature of something this of this magical status.
Yeah.
So imagine your CEO sitting there talking about working on a program and the cost growth is getting out of hand, and but that's the nature of something that you're working on that's technically magical, is like what he's saying. Wonder what the hell those people were thinking on this shareholder call, and they're listening to CEO talk about a
But
magical secretive program.
they weren't the audience for it. The government was the audience for it.
Oh man.
So behind the scenes, they have probably been screaming for years about cost overruns, the cost of these things, more work that was coming down the line. All of these things were probably happening behind the scenes. And he is somebody who's come out and, has been very confident in his statements of his knowledge and belief, whichever way you want to say it, of NHI and extraterrestrial craft. He's now pretty much said, it's almost like extortion to a sense, because somebody has to bail him out, and it has to be the government. So now you've got to figure it out. And now he's added more pressure by saying it publicly.
I've asked ChatGPT if any of the other big government contractors like a Raytheon or anyone else or Boeing, have any of them come out and made a statement like this where they're acknowledging a secretive program. And even ChatGPT, Gemini, I tried them all, Grok, none of them are like, no. I mean, some of the CEOs have made statements like, we have things that could take you to the stars and back and blah, blah, blah. No, I'm talking about like, no, ChatGPT, focus here with me. A CEO making something on an earnings call about secretive programs. Has that ever happened? I can't get any results on that, or any hits. So I think that's a pretty amazing step. Just that.
It is, and again, that was his audience, was the government, the purse string holders. There's something behind the scenes when it comes to funding, and he just blew it wide open for them because, again, those calls, that SEC regulations.
Oh yeah.
And never mind the influential people who were on those calls. He just basically, showed his dick and said, go figure it out, because I'm not getting the checks, and we just lost $1 billion. So,
well, I mean, apparently
you go harass them for it, because it doesn't work with me doing it.
Yeah, I mean, apparently he made statements that, not only is it magical technology, but he said, we probably won't be able to talk about what the tech is for many years to come, but I can assure you that it's going to be in high demand for a very long time. So whatever Lockheed has created, and I just wonder if is this tying all into the Tic Tac then? I mean, do they feel like the cat's out of the bag now, and that they're going to have to make a statement about the Tic Tac? And to your point, they're just queuing up the government to say, look, we're ready. We know we can't talk about it, but we can toe the line.
Yep.
But,
but it's costing us $1 billion a year to toe that line. And it needs to be made up somewhere.
And I'm not thinking anything. I'm just thinking a UAS, an unmanned aerial system, is what I'm thinking they have. This is my guess. It's a UAS, and, they've been testing it. They've tested it recently. Maybe that's part of the drone sighting is, we do have multiple people reporting that we were getting messed with by China and some others, and maybe we put our own tech up too and said, well, we can fly circles around your tech. And the whole time we're sitting here watching it, and we don't even know what we're seeing because it's just defies technology. I don't know. What do you think, Hannibal?
What's Gene's opinion on what the drones were as a former Air Force?
Oh yeah, and I think Gene is northeast too, right? You're Gene,
Yeah,
aren't you
yeah.
up there in the
I mean,
thick
I'm
of
in
it?
Boston. I think I saw one. So I think there were 2 nights
Hmm.
there. I was observing something that was sort of off in the distance near Logan Airport that was glowing and hovering for at least 40 minutes
Oh
while I
wow.
was out having a cigar. And then I just got too cold to care anymore. And then there was another night, something about the size of a car.
Yeah.
And again, I couldn't really see it, but it made a sort of humming noise and went right over the house. Highly unusual, right around that same time period. Um, again, what they are, my guess is as valid as anybody else's in reality. I mean, I certainly think we have capacities to take down drones, right?
Oh,
It doesn't
absolutely.
doesn't involve missiles, doesn't. So
Right.
any of your commercial drones, there are, those futuristic laser gun looking things that they can just point it at it and boom, down it goes, and it safely, disables them. It comes, this was bigger than that, bigger than anything hobbyist. If it was hobbyist that have been swarming the area for it. So again, if it was drone related, then they had to have known, somebody had to have known its origin to been able to cut off any of those on the ground investigations. Where do you hide something like that to begin with anyway? In New Jersey, outside of, southern New Jersey,
Well, it was
really.
FAA research, right? That's what we were told.
Yeah, yeah.
Trump says it
And
was FAA
and what
research.
people don't realize, if you've never been to New Jersey, it's called the Garden State. And it is a rural state for outside of that, little New York City area and then over by Philly. It is very rural and outdoors, and there's all sorts of little secret nooks and crannies to hide stuff out in, including like a former military base that
Could it have been China, though, like putting on a display of kind of intimidation to us?
I mean, again, it's all of the things that would need to be involved because they're not going to fly there. It's technically easier for them to have done it on the West Coast than the East Coast, which means then there's ships that had to be involved for
Yeah.
them to stage off of. That increases the risk profile. I think Casey, you and I texted about it, right?
Yeah.
If we did down one of them, if one of them malfunctioned and was down, then you run the risk of the reverse engineering by the government, identifying the components and all of that. Would
Huge
they
risk.
want to risk that?
Yeah, because we talked about them flying in which was just a variation, right, of what they went and got Osama bin Laden with and abided by Pakistan. I think they just did a variant of the Apache, right? It was
Yep.
like a high-end, high-tech Apache, and we end up crashing one, right? I mean,
Right. First use.
but they have contingency plans. They already have it worked out. Okay, if we crash one of these things, what do we have to do? Well, we got boots on the ground. They're going to blow it, which is what they did. But to your point, no boots on the ground. What do you do if one of these things comes down? I mean, like you can't. That's why the China thing is a little hard for me to bite off.
I mean, again, everything is to a degree risk management.
Yeah.
You always have to ask the question: who benefits, right? How do they benefit, and what are the risks they're going to get caught?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which of all the whistleblowers do you find the most compelling?
Honestly, to me, they're all guys who probably saw people who saw stuff and they've got stories. I mean, I don't find any one more compelling to the other because again, the structure of this whistleblower system to me seems so inauthentic that I'll tell you, if I have compassion for anybody, it's Lou Elizondo, as unpopular of opinion that may be, because I think guys like him maybe even Grush to a degree, they had a lot of latitude to do what they were doing, as in terms of being whistleblowers and or
Mhm.
former officers of the departments and things. Um, but they're controllable, right?
Yeah.
They control them through the clearance, they control them through the your retirement pay, and control them through, you don't want a bad recommendation from the government when you're looking for a new job. So they have those control levers on them. And I think Lou went off script. Lou went off script and they set him up to fail.
It could be. And I mean, I kind of going in with that whistleblower question too, because that's a good question. I mean, and I'm kind of right there with you, but you talked recently on the crane thing. So I know we got a couple people watching, maybe more than just a couple, and they want to know, they wanted me to ask you specifically some more on that. This is us pushing back on Gene a little bit. So,
Yep.
Gene's saying, hey, it's probably a weapons depot out there. They probably are asking people not to talk about it, right? Because, they don't want a lot of
Right. There's
attention on
probably
that
nukes,
place.
there's probably nukes and torpedoes and things like that there. Yeah.
But what I guess my pushback, Gene, is like, wouldn't our adversaries already know that's there? I mean, do they really need the UFO community to speak up and say anything? Or is this just standard operating procedure? When well-knowns or people in the community who have 600,000 followers on YouTube, they start shedding light on a base that has sensitive material, whatever that sensitive material might be.
Right.
Standard operating procedures to reach out and just say, "Hey, move on." Because
Yeah.
would that be a standard operating procedure? Because I
Yeah,
don't know.
it would be. And again, you have to look at, really what the threat landscape is, right? So you're right. Russia and China probably know, they probably
They
have the
already know
exact
it's there.
inventory of everything that's sitting there, or a close enough estimate, right? That's
Yeah.
the way government works. The real threat, or the real thing is to be concerned about, is the terrorism risk. And those small groups of individuals, the lone wolf as it might be,
The ones that
who
probably don't have great intel.
who don't have great intel, who are suddenly turned on to, oh, this might be a place, and they start looking at it and they're like, oh, it's kind of sparse, oh, it's big, it's easier to hide and maneuver around, and they're examining, and now they're drawn to going on Google Earth and checking things out and whatnot,
Yeah.
in the hopes of maybe I can find something that I can do something with.
Yeah, and the story we're talking about, Hannibal, is this. I don't know if you've seen this. He was on Jesse Michaels. I think his name was Randy, Randy something. But he was out at Crane and saw craft and saw, anomalous things. And so this Crane location, I think it's somewhere in Indiana, if I'm
Navy
not
Beach, yeah.
mistaken. And they I mean, it's really large, and they have tons of underground bunkers. But when you ask ChatGPT what it is, it says it's just a weapons depot, essentially. But you know, I did
Well, that's what
hear.
the base's mission is. I mean, it's not, again, it's not a secret. That is the base's mission. It's a landlocked base, pretty much, that stores munitions. It does, it has like some special warfare um, support capabilities. Again, like, probably all around munitions and things like that. Um, and it just fits those structures being on a base that has that mission. That is exactly what you'd expect to see.
Yeah, no, I think like when Hannibal asks the question about whistleblowers, those are the ones that kind of interest me. The ones that and I get tied up not in what they put up front about their story, the ones that tell their story and they say, hey, I was on base and this happened to me and I saw this.
Yeah.
I don't get interested in that part of their story. I get interested in like what you're talking about, the control of that whistleblower.
Right.
Who is controlling them? Because there is still Dopser. There's still some things they have to go through in order to say what they want to say.
Yeah.
And they can't just say whatever they want. and you know this because when you push them on it, they'll tell you. They'll say, "Well,
Right.
I can't talk about that."
I can't talk about that.
So, but you're a whistleblower.
The only thing that's going to make September interesting is they have these firsthand witness who comes in and they sit down and they go through the story, and then at some point, they reach in their pocket and pull out the photo nobody expected they were going to pull out. Something has to be done very publicly, and that's the only way they do it. Oh, I have this recording.
Yeah.
And then all bets are off.
But is there such a thing as
otherwise it's just a story?
Is there such a thing though as an ordained or controlled whistleblower?
Again, there could, it could be,
It's not a whistleblower like we would think of you. A whistleblower to us, the public, we're thinking somebody's just going to come spill the beans, right? They're going to tell us all the
I was a whistleblower. There definitely could be, I would say, 100%.
Yeah.
I was a whistleblower in the oil and gas industry. I mean, that's, in the late, or, before I retired. And so
But did you still feel controlled to where you couldn't really say whatever you wanted to?
No, because again, the whistleblower aspect of it was the company was lying about something, right? I was approached by the lawyers for the opposite party who were like, "Do you know anything about this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know everything. Go ask for this, ask for this, ask for that, boom, boom, boom." And then, and it ultimate, and even in that case, it was in the UK, but the judges were, no judge wanted to sort of rule against the, mega galactic, oil company, and kept passing it up until it went to the Supreme Court. And they're like, yeah, sorry guys, he's right.
You don't want to take it on. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, it's what the only value then for the whistleblower is, if it's a similar type of situation, is telling Congress where to go look. But then if we run into the SAP issue again, it becomes a non-point.
Yeah.
It becomes more of the same thing. And never mind, going back to Lockheed, we haven't touched on the IP or intellectual property legal blockade that would really kill everything. Even if they discovered something, even if they made a connection, all they got to do is intellectual property, and that's protected under another law.
Yeah.
So, the choices that this is the choice I made. I don't need any more proof. I don't need the background. I get why you've done what you've done through the years. I've laid it all out there on the site, for God and everybody to have a look at.
Hannibal's got it up here.
This is your website here. What is this? What's this little diagram you got down here? Could you tell us about
that one there? I don't have my glasses.
Oh, sorry. It changes when you click.
So that's about so that's the fusion system. Those are the solenoid systems that's all describing how it creates. And in the book itself, it's all translated.
Yeah, right.
That is essentially, that is the craft itself there. Again, this is all about those solenoids, how they generate the lift, how they manipulate the gravitational fields. As you see, I think if you click on an image, Hannibal, I think it should open up independent in like a light box, and we can like examine any of them. Oh, right on the image itself.
Maybe not. Maybe it's my computer.
But try down, scroll down a little bit. There's like the key, all the mini.
Oh, there we go.
See if does that do it? If you double click,
Double. Well, maybe we'll have to.
Yeah, I'll have to check. I thought I set it up to do that, but I could have.
Yeah, I mean, this is. I mean, if you make this stuff up, you'd have to be pretty crazy.
Well, again, right? You talk about legitimacy. You talk about well, how do you know it's authentic? Well, who has time for that?
Right.
Right. Who's doing that if you ain't getting paid for it?
Exactly.
Yeah, you can tell the headers.
Not for this either.
You can tell the headers on the pages when you look more through the book and everything. It's presented as a report to some important process. It's definitely not just.
And in it too, Hannibal, in one of the later chapters, particularly when he's talking about consciousness, he refers to, so he makes a reference back to other work that he's done. And so whoever is reading this, there's a reference that says, see author's past paper to the Duma, which is the Russian parliament, titled such and such, So then you have to assume the reader then has access to the Russian parliament's records to be able to go make that reference. And the one other thing, in case, I don't know if we shared this to you, we discovered that he and Nat's mother actually lived in Priorsk, Kazakhstan, which is basically USSR's Area 51. It's a closed military city. And they lived there when they first married and moved to Latvia only right before Natalia was born.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And while she knew they were there, she didn't know exactly where. And somebody unrelated, was like, "Oh yeah, your parents lived in Priorsk," and we were like, "Hold on, this is."
Yeah, the questions you don't ask when you're a child, right?
So here's one way of showing some of the stuff. Oops, I think I just took you out by accident. But like, there's one document. Sorry to put it across your face there, Casey, but
no, have at it.
What can you tell us about this one?
So again, this has to do with the cosmic cycles, and the movement of the what the hell is it? So it's saying it's 7,150 kilometers per hour. And I don't read Russian fluently. I'm just certain things I just don't.
How many languages do you speak?
The only thing I speak conversationally is Lithuanian. I know enough of a lot of languages to sort of squeak by, to eat, to get in trouble. I know enough Russian to pick up women. That's about the extent of it. My wife's, she's fluent in like 6 languages.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot on the website there people can check out, and I could maybe load these another time.
Yeah.
But,
and up the top of the screen there, you see the drop downs. That has a lot of the data tables of some of the more investigative side of the work that I've done, those comparisons. Again, trying to make it digestible, but there's so much information. There's no short answer to anything.
Very cool. Hannibal's trying to
just to go back to that page for a second there, you were seeing the drop downs at the top of the screen. I'll look at the history. Yep. So I recently was reading one of Richard Dolan's book just about, it's amazing all the history of the documented UFO stuff that's out there since the 40s. We think that it's only recent that they've been investigating it that closely, but there's so much happening pre-70s even.
If you go to that, how the blueprint aligns, and the second one down, UFO phenomena analysis. So if you scroll down that table, so right there, so this is actually the breakdown. You can see the phenomenon that's reported, and then the category and the mechanism actually gives you the scientific explanation of why this phenomenon happens based on the design of the craft that he was reverse engineering.
Why does it happen? What's the reason for the phenomenon, and is it multiple phenomenon?
It's multiple. It's all that list to the far left is, are the most common reported phenomenon that comes from witnesses and whistleblowers and things like that. And so then I tried to correlate it again to the specific scientific element that would explain why that would happen.
So what is their main goals here? Do you think there's various different things at different times that they're coming here to do, or do they have bases here?
I think over time, again, I think I think we have been engineered to a degree. I think essentially Earth is like a base of sorts to them for whatever it is their cosmic role, their cosmic role is. Are they just there to seed life? Is that their job? And then monitor and curate and expand it. Are there intergalactic Star Wars and there's hunt for resources and all the rest of it? But I think, I like to think of it in terms of, what we're doing with Mars, right? We threw up some satellites, we're throwing a robot, we're talking about how to make it habitable. Perhaps we've done the same thing here. And again, what we're looking at are the creators, the owners, organizers, whatever they are to us, whatever the relationship coming in. But I think they're very much a part of the natural world and order of things.
So your website is basically a version of disclosure. If someone wants to get lost in this for a week to figure out what you've done here, I mean, this is a lot of work that you've put into this.
Yeah. Well, in my original hope, and somewhere in there, the beginning of one of those charts, there's a 182-page white paper I sent to the UAP caucus, the best email I had available, to say, listen, the work is done. Go ask questions. Now you just have to ask better questions. And again, and I'll call it right out. I know David Grush has this material.
Right.
I know he does. Never got a phone call, never got hey, explain this to me. Because you could take this material, you can take the stuff, you can take the work I've done, and you can sit Lockheed down and start asking them questions.
Right.
Right? Explain to me your work in this particular field. Well, thank you. That's fascinating. How'd you come up with that? What are the origins? Because that's what this book is really about. These are the origins, the genesis of all of these government programs. And there is nothing in nature, Hannibal, that has not began with an observation. We have sonar and radar because we observed bats and dolphins. Right? We know about gravity because an apple fell on Isaac Newton's head. We have nuclear bombs because we observed an atom and split it. What did you observe that made you need to go 16,000 miles an hour horizontally and suddenly take a 90-degree right turn?
Right. So what do you think the biggest danger is that could happen between us and the phenomenon?
I mean, the biggest danger is that essentially I try not to put human, our thoughts into things, but look at things in the order of nature, right? And so the order of nature is survival of the fittest. The order of nature is, the search for resources, right? When you are an ant, ant colonies move because they need resources to eat and procreate and all the rest of it. So in the greater sense of nature, if we just look at it from a natural perspective, that would be the same thing, right? So now as humans, then we get into fighting and wars over territory for what? For resources, for control, for power, for, consolidation of power and things like that. So what's the worst thing they want? They want the resources here, and we are insignificant to them, and they'll just storm right through us to get it. And whether they kill us all in the process or they just ignore us and kind of shoo us off as they take our resources and leave us to figure out the mess afterwards. Any of those are possible, but I think, again, to get your mind around it, it has to be something to do with that sort of natural order of things.
Do you think they could care about us more now because we're kind of entering space now and we're going to the moon, we're trying to colonize Mars. We're entering their territory a little bit more than we have in the past, and now with these nuclear bombs, obviously they're very interested in nuclear weapons, it seems.
Well, the craft itself operates by a thermonuclear process. So, they might have an interest in, oh, how did we know, and how did we come up with it, and what are we doing with it, and all the rest. Again, I think um those incidents of the like Malmstrom Air Force Base and the missiles getting shut on and off and all the rest of it. So I have a very unpopular, unsexy opinion of all of that. Again, based on all of this, I think perhaps what they were doing was researching us and our nuclear capabilities. And those instances of things shutting down and turning back on, all of that were accidents. It was their technology, it was their Wi-Fi not mashing with our Wi-Fi the right way, and it would throw us offline. And that wasn't so bad. And I actually think Chernobyl might have been one of those situations. And the people responding to that mishmash of the Wi-Fi, boom, led to a disaster. And the trying to be short version of how I concluded that, because from that point in 1986, there has been a marked reduction of UFOs interfering with nuclear operations after Chernobyl than pre-Chernobyl. Pre-Chernobyl was almost a regular thing that happened. Then I think it's happened once since Chernobyl. So again, people like to think, oh, it's the aliens. They're warning us. They're telling us they can turn it on and off. They're telling us we have to be kind and peaceful and da da da. If they wanted to do that, they could have stopped us from building the bases in the first. They could have stopped us from
Yeah,
making them
why don't they
operational.
just tell us? Why do they tell us through school children and these weird abduction stories?
Right. So again, that's like putting human emotions on your dog, right? It's the thing that we do to try and understand it. But again, from the evidence, from the science, at least that I'm trying to follow in this, I think it's more likely the scenario there was something about what they were doing that was interfering with our systems, because again, there's a marked difference pre and post Chernobyl in that type of activity. There's so many, and if you haven't guessed by now, I'm a patterns guy. That was always my thing. When we talked earlier, case about the vast amount of paperwork they push out. Again, that was like such a common thing in intel investigations, like particularly the former Soviet Union. I'd say, oh, well, tell me how this works. And they would come in with a stack of papers and documents and books and things for me to read to explain it. I'd be like, oh, thank you very much. Now tell me how it works. And then I want to go see how it works. And then I'll start reading stuff. But what they wanted to do was have me start reading everything and never, and lose interest or never make my way out to actually look at anything hands-on.
What do you think about hybrids? Do you think that because all of these abduction stories seems to involve taking samples of sperm and eggs in one way or another?
Yeah. I mean, again, I'd just say what would the natural, sort of order of things be? In a sense, what would we do? We would do, what do we do with puppies? What do we do with dogs? Right? You tell me how we wind up with labradoodles and everything else. We find a purpose. We found, we found a need, we found a desire or a want, whatever it is, and we, just genetically coded. Well, we do it with fruits and vegetables. We do it with our chickens. So the idea, again, an intelligent species would be much better at doing it than perhaps we are. But we do it in every aspect of, again, it's part of everyday life. Splicing, manipulating, genetically coding. Why not? Absolutely.
I don't know why this guy thinks you look like Paul Orndorff, but I don't. I've no offense to either of you, but Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. So, as far as where you see this going in the next 5 years, you mentioned 2027 could be a big year. Just as we wrap things up here, um, what do you see happening? Is it just going to be more of the same, or do you see President Trump actually coming forward with some type of disclosure?
I think, again, we're in what they want to be disclosure. I think they're shifting a bit now into this transition by design. So we'll begin to see more and more signals and more of these drips not being so much independent drips, but being more aligned to perhaps proper scientific discoveries, and things like that. I think anything that we expect to see from the politicians, we have to keep in mind, again, it needs to be politically beneficial for them. Nothing will be released outside of a cycle that they need it to be released in order to achieve whatever the political goal is, which is always reelection and keeping the party in power, and all of those factors. Right? Don't be fooled that it's by their benevolent nature that they want to share UFO, UAP information. Anything that gets shared, anything that comes out, is for the benefit of the party and maintaining power and all the rest of it. What's the great unknown in all of it? The great unknown is exactly that: what we don't know, that we don't know what we don't know. And the only thing that throws any of that off is some kind of radical disclosure, either by a witness coming forward with something indisputable, or a NHI led event.
Are they the ones preventing disclosure, by the way? Is it them that could be saying, hey, we don't want this disclosed? Because how is it otherwise that all the governments in the world are actually uniting on not saying anything about this?
Again, I think it has to do with the evolution, the maturity of our conscious. Look, I posted it the other day. I don't know if you see it, Casey saw it. We just lost our damn minds over Cracker Barrel changing the logo. Don't tell me society's ready for alien, alien overlords or alien technology to drop on our laps and everything's gonna be fine and dandy. So, if there is that level,
I agree with you 100% there, because most people don't believe in this and don't even pay attention to any of this, for one thing.
Yeah, we're
Right.
We're
pretty
only like a
fragile.
small percentage of people that
right?
do. I don't know if they could really accept it. And even us, a lot of us believe that they're going to be like that's Stephen Greer friendly
Yeah.
versions that
And
it may or may not be.
right, they may not be, so me personally, right? This Dealing with this body of work, putting it together in the book, doing the research, all of these things in a lot, have really like transformed me, in so much as I'm starting to be and think in terms of being more intentional about things, and where I'm giving my attention and where I'm spending my time, and prayer and all of these things have so much more meaning to me. I think that question comes up, oh, religious institutions going to fall apart. Again, I found it to sort of be even more of a strengthening of the mysteries, let's say, that we think of in religious terms, whatever that is that anybody follows. So I haven't found it a challenge that way. I've always been a bit of a stoic myself. I can only control what I can control, and what I can control is how I respond to things. And, for as much as it aggravates me to, sort of have this and be sharing it and have people not be able to get their minds around it. Again, I will spend as much time as I need to with anybody who really wants to, grasp it and understand it. But I'm living life like it's already happened. Like I already know this. There's nothing you're gonna tell me, outside of, oh, they're coming here tomorrow and tomorrow we all shall die. All right, well, that's a different story. But I know it's there. I know it's part of the natural order of the universe. And, I still got to get up in the morning. The kids still got to go to school. What am I going to do? And if they're coming and they're going to wipe us all out, well, that's, again, what's it matter at that point? Anyway, if they want to have a fight, I'm up for a fight with anybody, anytime, anyhow.
Yeah.
I
I'd
used to
rather have that and pass away and at least know.
right.
But by the way, you look like Red Bastien. That's the wrestler you look like. I don't know if you know him or not, but that's the run that you are.
I gotcha. But I used to tell my kids, I was like, well, when I die, bury me with my guns. Why? I said, because when the Lord brings me back, I'm coming out shooting,
Oh, there you go. What's your theory on consciousness? Because you're clearly an incredibly intelligent guy from your website there. You must have a good theory about it.
So what I have learned from this body of work is that I really no longer consider time linearly going in a straight line. I think time operates more in cycles, and those cycles have overlaps. And I think that consciousness is our tuner. Consciousness is our radio that, whether you believe in paranormal, in ghosts, whether you believe, multiple dimensions, I think all of those have truth to them. But the fact is, reality is just this thing that we have been encased in is tuned to what it's tuned to. And we are tuned to one another. We're tuned to certain people. Other people's frequencies kind of, put us off or what have you. But consciousness is nothing more than the tuner that limits our ability to have wider universal knowledge and access and interaction and all of those things. And this is the journey we're on as humans. This is the journey my father-in-law, had, that he sets out the blueprint for, that we are on to eventually get there. And again, once we get there, we may find ourselves being what we consider aliens now to be.
Very interesting. Well, I appreciate all the information. I could definitely pick your brain all night, but I know both of you guys have kids. So I'll let you two wrap it up. And engineeringinfinitybook.com is where you can pick up Gene's book.
Thank you. And again, Hannibal, thank you. Thank you for what you do on the pro wrestling side. I was an 80s kid. That Hulk Hogan, from the cartoons, the first WrestleMania, and I've had a chance. I've met some of those guys. Actually met Hogan down at the shop in Florida, and even like Ric Flair, as stupid as it might sound, like I get teary eyed, with those guys, because I'm like, as a kid, I was a quiet kid. I was a good kid, quiet. I became an asshole as an adult, sure, but those were the guys in those moments that like inspired me to be a tough guy or gave me that little comeback to give. And that's why I love what Hannibal does and in keeping that alive and whatnot, because I think it's more than entertainment for a lot of people. At least for me, it was a part of my childhood that really helped me come out and sort of find strength. And I don't know if people appreciate it in that same way.
We're missing those wrestlers today, sadly, for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so give us one last plug here, and I'll wrap it up. Thank you, all the fans, for the tons of comments. I know there's a few little arguments in the comment section, but that's always nice to see.
Yeah, engineeringinfinitybook.com. Everything's there. You know, it's in depth, but explore it. Check out. Go down to the footer, and there's some additional links there to other articles and research. There's a link to my wife's website, nataliasticco.com. She's a brilliant opera singer. For anyone who, again, if you want to get in touch with the universe, you can do it through music as well. That's a whole other discussion. But yeah, there's a lot on there. We're working on actually a video series with Arthur Wahlberg, who's the oldest of the Wahlberg brothers. He's a friend, and he's hosting, and we're actually teaching him a bunch about the UAP UFO communities. And really, there's a lot of good, funny stuff in that, but just as interesting. So I appreciate the support and the interest and the coming on.
Let's see another double bicep to finish this off, and I'm going to make that